Right, hi guys, welcome back to my War Games hobby channel. We're having another game tonight. The one that I recorded 2 weeks ago, the Russian retreat in 1812. We're replaying it to see if we can get a different result. So I'll let you have a look at what we've done so far. Right, so here's the French. They're laid out and ready to go. Very similar layout to the last game we played, but we've learnt a few things about the rules that may help the French this time. We'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so as I said, we're going to be doing this battle. The Russians have set up in this little village. This here, let me just show you. Hold on a minute. This here is in fact a frozen river. And these are the two bridges. And you can see this time, unlike the last time we played, the French have set up in formation. So they're hoping to do volley fire and cause a problem with these guys in the village. Because although they might not kill many, they're hoping that they'll get a bad reaction on their dice. Right, the Russians, other than that, have yet to come on. And I'll show you where they are. Hold on a minute, I'll just take you over to the table. These are the Russians, and all those have yet to come on the board. We don't know where they're coming on, unfortunately. So we'll just have to wait and see if it's in a good position. This week I'm playing a Russian, because last time I played a French and I lost badly. So let's see if I can win this time round. I'm not very optimistic, because the chap that wrote this scenario, or designed it and did a lot of work on it, is playing the French, and I think he knows what he's doing, whereas I didn't. So, right, we'll see how we get on.
You did, Alec, that's the thing. You saw what you did.
He can see where I went wrong.
Now he can see how to get it right.
Thank you. Right, so we're going to, I'm only going to report back after moves. I'm not going to record the whole thing because it just takes too long, but I will report back every so often and let you know what's happened. Right, okay.
Nice to see who goes first then?
Well, I'm going to do a little bit of an update, guys. The bad news for the Russians is that when the Cossacks try to come on, they come on over here, over this part of the river, which is probably the worst place they could come on, because we wanted them to get behind the enemy or attack down the sides, over there or here. But no, they came on behind the village, which is not ideal. But we got some Opolcheny coming on over there, and the ones in the wood, the infantry in the wood, which you can see in there. I've just done volley fire on these and got 2 casualties, but unfortunately for the Russians, they threw well on their reaction test or their morale test, so they're okay. Not much else has happened. The Russians have got more to come on, but they haven't come on yet. Oh yes, sorry. Over here, this unit here did volley fire into the building, and they managed to get 2 casualties. But the morale was okay.
Yeah,
they stayed there.
Yeah, we loved
much
it.
to everybody's surprise.
At least
so that's where we are at the moment. It's sort of good things and bad things for both sides, really. Oh, and the cavalry had to move. They had to do something. Well, they didn't have to, but they decided to move forward. But there's nothing there, so I don't know why they did that, really. But there we are. We don't mind the French doing that. They can wander off in the opposite direction they need to go if they like. Right, report back later. Okay, another update while Neil moves the French forward. The partisans over here got shot at with volley fire. They lost 2 people, and now you can see over there they're running away. And he lost another 2 because they fled.
I didn't lose any in the volley.
Didn't lose any in the volley,
in the volley at all. That was purely morale broke. Purely
morale, right. Yeah, they didn't lose any in the volley, but with volley fire, of course, you have to do a test, and they rolled a 1, which wasn't a good time to roll a 1, really. Never mind. They're fleeing. The rest of the French are now moving forward, and we need the last lot of Russians to come on, which haven't come on yet. Right, just another update. There's not much happening over here. The Russians have come on. but they're not getting their cards come up. The French cavalry have made a move. They're coming round the flank of the Russians here, although they'll just go into the woods in a minute, hopefully. And in the middle, the French are moving forward. So there's lots of Russians in the village, including the Cossacks, that really can't do much at the moment because they don't want to cross that river. They've got a 20% chances of a loss. So they're just standing behind a bit of cover at the moment, waiting for the right moment to come forward. And some Opolcheny over that corner there have come on behind the woods, and they're now moving down to get behind the flank of the French there. Right, this unit that was here just lost 3 men, then they had to flee and they lost 2 more.
Yep.
So they're in a bad way. Over on the other corner, over on the other side, we got the French cavalry coming round here. We did open fire from these guys in skirmish order, and they did manage to kill 2. Oh, and they are shaken. But they are, if they get to move, they're obviously going to charge in there. What else has happened? The
other guys try to come across
these
the
bow-armed cavalry have come around here and are now threatening this unit. But other than that, the Cossacks are still doing absolutely nothing because they don't want to cross the river. And they're just staying safely behind cover at the moment. They need to start doing something soon. But if they cross the river, of course, they've got a 20% chance of drowning, so I don't think we want to do that. Another quick update while the French do some moving. Over here, these bow-armed Russians are moving round here. The French infantry moved into the wood. Interestingly enough, these guys are ferocious, so next time they move, because that unit's smaller than them, they're going to have to try and charge them through the wood, which may not be a good idea. Anyway, we'll see what happens on that. What else? Oh, there was a volley fire over here to these guys, and we lost 2 more figures, but their morale was okay. The Opolcheny, believe it or not, we rolled a 7, so they're okay. Not much else has happened. The French, as you can see here, are up to the building, and there's going to be a melee there. So I'll give a little update of what's happening here. These are cavalry. They're actually shaken, but they could still charge. But they're more than 8 inches away from these. I did a nifty move here, bringing my lancers up, thinking they're light cavalry, but they're within 9 inches of these, so they could have charged. I've just realised, though, they're militia cavalry, not light cavalry, so in fact we're both just a little bit too far away to charge this move. So I messed up there. I thought they were light cavalry. They're not, they're just cavalry, with a lance. Right, so these guys have moved back. They are unloaded though, but at least now they're facing the French cavalry. So a bit of a standoff there, a bit of a mess up on my part. Never mind. My bow-armed cavalry that came round here have just been fired on by these 6 Voltigeurs, and they killed 4 men, and then I've just rolled a 0 on the dice, so guess what? They're not going to stand there, are they? They're gone. So that was a complete waste of time for that unit. They never did get a chance to use their ferocious and get stuck in. They got shot at and got annihilated. Yeah, well, a little bit of an update. The French dragoons moved forward, and then they managed to charge my Opolcheny, Lancer Opolcheny here, who fled. They had to do a test because they're being charged by a close order unit, and they rolled a 0. So they fled and they lost 3 men, so they're running away.
To stop into fleeing, you need the number at the top. 4 inches?
Over here, the Cossacks have crossed the river without losing a man,
continues to flee.
then charged
So you need
the
to do
light
another
infantry
roll
on the edge
again.
of that wood. Then the light infantry, or the skirmish, the Voltigeur skirmishers fled.
Really
They lost
hard
3
to get
men.
3 men.
Well, you got 7. You've only got 3 figures there. You
And they're still running.
So you don't 4.
Oh, skirmishers, no, they can't ever
Oh,
rally.
the Voltigeurs gone, have they?
Yeah, they can never rally.
The Voltigeurs have now run away. And the 3 survivors that were in that wood have routed. So the French are actually, they're stuck in the middle here, and they're not moving forward much at all. They seem to have stood still for a rather long time. They're surrounded by all these Russians.
I don't even know what half the things are, so maybe...
So they've got to get across that river somehow, but they don't seem to want to try. Maybe they will in a minute. Right, a quick update. Over here, there were some Opolcheni. They got shot at with volley fire, and they lost 3. And then they did a very, very bad morale dice, so they've gone. Over here, the Cossacks that were on the edge of this wood charged here. Only killed 1 man, which is that one. But then they lost, I think it was 3, and fell back and lost a couple more. Then they got shot at by these here, and as you can see, there's only 2 survivors, and they are now fleeing. Another update: the Cossacks here charged across the river, caused a couple of casualties on the infantry, but they lost some crossing the river and in the melee as well. So although they won that melee because they rolled a bad morale dice, the infantry had to fall back. There's only 2 of them left. And over the other side here, the militia Opolcheni mounted troops fled again, and although they didn't lose any for fleeing, they lost 1 for fleeing into the river. So the Russians are losing casualties, but the French are still not managing to move forward anywhere, and they're going to run out of time, I think. So despite the fact the Russians are losing a lot of figures at the moment, the French still aren't able to take advantage of that. Will they have time? I don't know. The 2 Cossacks here and the officer, which is the other side of the bridge, charged into this unit and bravely died. In fact, the officer did survive, but he fled and then rolled a bad dice, so he's routed. So that's me out of the game. The other 2 Russian players are still carrying on. The French are still not moving, but the Russians are taking heavy casualties now. But we've got some good 2 units of Jaegers coming in over there.
6+. Skirmish order is...
And the village is still in Russian hands. Right, last update. There's some shooting over here from the Jaegers, caused a few casualties on the guard, but the game is over. We've run out of time. The Russians are claiming victory because, of course, although they've lost a lot more figures, as you can see there, against the French over there, they actually have not, their objective was to get across the river, and they haven't got a single unit across the river. So the Russians are claiming a victory despite their heavier losses.
The scenario said we didn't care about losses.
No, the scenario said we didn't care about losses, so we didn't. We threw everybody in to slow them down. So our tactic, our strategy,
we're still holding the village.
Worked. Yeah.
They'll freeze.
Good victory to the Russians.
Russian winter do its thing.
Do you agree with that, Frenchies?
What's that?
That we won.
That was the criterion, yeah.
Right, anyway, good game. Okay, so what's my take on that game? The second retreat from Moscow skirmish that we played. As you know, the first one I played French and we failed dismally. So I swapped sides. I was Russian this time. We had 3 Russian players. That seems to work better. And 2 French. So my observations are this. Firstly, yeah, okay, it was a big game. Probably too big. 750 points aside. It's quite a big game, really. And it worked okay, don't get me wrong. We felt that it was good fun. But the problem with a game of that size is when, like we did, we split the forces between the 3 Russians, and one of our guys just had the irregulars in the village, and there were long periods when he was sat around doing nothing because his cards just weren't coming up, Myself and Andy both had two different troop types, so we were more involved with the game. So that probably wasn't a good idea, really. It would have been nice to have given Dom some other troop types. The problem is, if you go down that route, if we'd given him any more troop types, we would have almost had too many units. We didn't have that many anyway. I mean, ideally, it's a 2v2 game, not 5 players. But we had 5 that wanted to play, so we did it anyway. But yeah, 2 against 2 probably would have been better. Dom got a bit bored, I think, a few times. In fact, I think he had about half an hour and he didn't do anything at all. So you have to be careful how you distribute the troops. I think you have to have more than one troop type, otherwise you're in danger of being left out of the game for quite long periods. The trouble with doing that, if you split troop types up between 2 or 3 players, and you've only got one commander for that troop type, who has that commander? So it's not an easy thing to work out, really. It didn't spoil the game hugely, but it probably would have been, in hindsight, better just as a 2v2. Do they work, games of that size? Well, I thought it was pretty good, actually. I suppose it's a little bit over the top. Probably 600 points might be better, but anyway, we enjoyed the game. We played it twice now. We wouldn't be put off playing it a third time, but as I say, I think we'd stick to 2v2. As for the strategy of the Russians, well, the scenario, we followed the scenario rules. We weren't worried about losses. We were just throwing everything at the French to slow them up. When I played the French last time, I decided I'd go hell for leather to get across that river. By doing so, of course, I wasn't fighting back against the Russian forces as much as I could have done, and therefore I basically, got some troops across the river, even occupied one of the buildings, but it wasn't enough, and by then I'd virtually been wiped out. This time, Neil decided he would fight back a lot more, but of course that meant that he wasn't moving. If you're loading or you're firing, you're not moving in the right direction. So he just ran out of time. Although his losses were much less than we did last week, and they did give the Russians a bit of a problem casualty-wise. They didn't get across that. Well, they did once get across the river, but they were pushed back quite easily, and they didn't get anywhere else across at all. So yeah, the Russians claimed victory purely because they followed the scenario rules, and we didn't let them cross the river, although we lost a lot of men. But it was just that, that was Neil's attempt to try and weaken the Russians so much so that they could get across the river without opposition. But in fact, they just ran out of time in the end. Last week, I did sort of mention that I thought the cavalry, well, lancers especially Cossacks, were a bit overpowered. I've changed my view a little bit. I think you can't really base anything like that on one game. Last week, I rolled terrible dice, and Graham, who had the Cossacks last week, was just rolling unbelievably good dice. And when that happens, it's difficult to know what you can do. You can't do anything. You're just going to lose. So I think the fact that they get a +2 on their attack rolls, so they're hitting on 4s rather than 6s, is pretty powerful. And the fact that also the losses that the unit they're attacking don't fight back, they just fight back with those surviving. It's a pretty powerful thing. And if you roll average dice, I think it's always going to be a difficult one to beat. I think they are still slightly overpowered. Last week wasn't probably, or the last game we played probably wasn't a good example. This week, yet again, I rolled pretty dismally with my dice, which I'm prone to do, and I lost all my Cossacks in the end. So Graham, who didn't play this week, he's away holidaying in the Greek island somewhere, but he was very vocal when he found out what I'd done with my Cossacks. Anyway, so although I still think Lancers are okay, maybe not overpowered, but they're very powerful. I wouldn't like to see too many units of lancers in a game myself personally. But I think because they are so powerful, you'll find in these rules a lot of people, if they're going to have cavalry, they'll be persuaded to have lancers, and I think we'll get a disproportionate amount of lancers in the game. One of the things that we discussed was that when an infantry unit flees, a cavalry unit charges them again, they have to flee again. They have no option, and we don't have a problem with that. The trouble is, sometimes, they're only moving sometimes 4 inches, and the cavalry might have only charged from 5 inches away, so they then have to stop on contact, and they don't continue pursuing. The unit they're attacking do have to flee, and they do roll for losses. But we were just wondering whether that's been thought through enough for the Napoleonic version of rules for the Shakos and Bayonets, because there's going to be a lot more cavalry used, and we were just wondering whether we might bring in a house rule that if the cavalry, once the infantry have fled, if the cavalry can still catch them, and they have to flee yet again. I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but we just feel that at the moment it seems a bit daft that infantry can get away from cavalry, although they're losing. If they roll well, they might not lose any. And they're running away from cavalry. They shouldn't be able to run away. They should get caught, really. So we might introduce a house rule that they do the full 10-inch move, and if they hit them a second time, then they have to do a second fleeing movement, and that I think would work quite well. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed that game. It was a scenario that Neil had sort of worked on over the sort of period that he was not able to go very far because of COVID, and he's been painting up all the troops were his, incidentally, and in that game, and all the terrain was his as well. So he's had a really nice project there. We will be doing different 1812 retreat from Moscow scenarios, I'm sure, in the coming months. I've got my own Napoleonic now. I've got some French and some Austrians, but they're not painted with snow on the basis, so I probably won't be using those if we do an 1812 scenario. But anyway, there we go. It was a good fun, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again soon.